Hi, I'm Chandan Ekanayaka. I'm the co-founder and creative director at Outer Loop Games, and we are currently making a game called Thirsty Suitors.
Anana, tell me, how did you come up with the concept for Thirsty Suitors?
Yeah, we've been thinking about it for a couple of years. Originally, we wanted to do a game about South Asian culture, which I am a part of that culture. Born in Sri Lanka, moved to the States. I was very young and grew up in the East Coast and West Coast now. And really in games that we haven't really seen that aspects of South Asian culture explored. We're seeing it in other media, in shows like Never Have I Ever, and been some movies about it, but thought it'd be fun to explore. Thought it'd be novel for folks outside of the culture, and thought it'd be fun for us to kind of figure out what our parents went through and what my kids are going through right now as as me as a parent. So.
Now, looking at the trailers and the recent press demo, you mentioned shows like Never Have I Ever. I see a lot of like Scott Pilgrim versus the World in this game. Like, how much did certain like pop culture shows or movies like influence the story at all?
I don't. Scott Pilgrim, I think for a visual aspect, because we are in a magical realism kind of a space where there's a regular world, and then when we get into battles, there's like this sort of more than magical space, surreal space, and I think that's the touchstone where Scott Pilgrim fits in. As far as story, I guess not really. I mean, in Scott Pilgrim, he's fighting his girlfriend's exes. In this game, there's like a similarity where Jala has to do battles with her exes, but it's more for reconciliation. She at the end of the battle, there's like a makeup and possible romance or friendship past that. So I think that's probably where the comparison comes from. As far as the story, we wanted to explore what it would be like to revisit your old relationships. So that's sort of where the start came from. And then I've been having to rekindle your relationship with your folks and family, and having to deal with that, what it's like in for a 20-something-year-old.
Is the main character Jala based on anybody in particular, and likewise are her exes based on anybody like in your real life?
We've definitely, from Magna Giant, who's the writer on this, and myself, we do the story together. There's definitely some elements of folks in our families, but we hope none of them recognize it. It's always a mixture of things. We start with some ideas. We knew where we wanted Jala to be in the beginning story, where we wanted to be at the end, and then creating the exes around that to tell her story and also to explore certain aspects of her life is sort of where we started with those. But there's definitely some personal families. We did some soul searching, and there's definitely some personal family stories and characters that might have been mixed together in various aspects in this game.
How did you approach designing the turn-based combat? Like, how are you able to put together what's a fairly deep combat system and weave it together with so much humor?
Yeah, so we knew the themes are going to be, for most folks not familiar, but we're exploring sort of love and breakup and family dynamics, which are more universal. And then for the combat, I'm a big Paper Mario 1000-Year Door fan, so we're kind of there's all sorts of aspects of turn-based combat in various Final Fantasies and throughout, but we thought sort of the idea of a turn-based combat with, on your turn, there's some action moments, and in our game, those action moments are tied to the beat of the battle too. There's a slight rhythmic component. We don't really, it's not really a feature thing we talk about because it's minor, but we thought the approachability of that, and then because the story is so much sort of narrative driven, the turn-based combat made sense to be able to have these beats where you do a move and then say a line. So there's definitely a bit of insult combat from some LucasArts games of the past. So there's some inspiration there. So it's a bit of Paper Mario and some other turn-based games, and then the needs for our specific game. So it started in one place, but based on sort of what we needed for the story, it became its own thing.
So explain what it means to be thirsty in the context of combat.
Right. So a thirsty is one of several mood types that Jala can, taunt types, which are moods that Jala can inflict on her opponents. So when an opponent is thirsty, they are less likely to attack you directly. So on their turn, if they're in thirst mood, which lasts for a number of turns based on how well your skills are and how well you apply it based on the sort of the timing movements. So in the demo, you fight Sergio, who's your third grade boyfriend, and he's very thirsty for you. So he's very susceptible to be thirsty. When he tries to attack Jala, he'll randomly attack himself or Jala, and also the damage done is lowered because he's in thirsty mood. And there's other moods like rage. Rage will make characters miss more often, but also means they will hit harder if they do land a blow.
I was surprised to see that skateboarding is such a major piece of the Thirsty Suitors formula. What made you want to integrate skateboarding as opposed to typical on-foot traversal?
Yeah, we part of kind of designing a character, we wanted Jala to have this sort of skateboarding background. Our animator is a big skateboarder, so like the way we do all our games is a combination of things and things people like to do on the team. And we had put together like a loading screen that had Jala on a skateboard. It was very kind of just hacked together pretty quickly, and everyone on the team really liked it, so we thought about exploring it. We didn't want to do it to a level as deep as, say, a Tony Hawk game, because we just know how much work that is, and Tony Hawk already exists. So it's more of a Jet Set Radio kind of inspired skateboarding. There's combos and there's depth to skateboarding for folks that want it, but if you want to just use it to have fun, you can look really good in this game while skateboarding. There's not a lot of penalties for it. So.
Will there be an intersection between skateboarding and combat at any point in the game?
So skateboarding leads into combat at times, or skateboarding leads into conversations like we do in the beginning of the game. And there are skateboarding type moves in combat, but there isn't combat while skateboarding, per se.
There's one aspect of the game that we really haven't had a chance to see in the press yet, and that's cooking. So explain how cooking will work within the context of the game.
Cooking is as stylish as the battling is. It uses very over-the-top sort of action-y timing elements mechanically, and you're cooking for your parents' approval. So Jala she left town and ran off with someone she thought she was in love with, and then left like her friends and family, and she hasn't talked to her parents in a while. So so in the story, she uses cooking as a way to kind of start a dialogue with her parents, and like her first cooking is going to be with her mom, and you're essentially, as a player, trying to win your mom's. You fill up your mom's approval meter with these. So she gives you a bunch of instructions, and then you're trying to follow along. And so it's a narrative device, but also mechanically, it is similar to the trend-based combat in feel. So.
And this is another way to kind of like teach players about Southeast Asian culture. Like you're cooking a lot of native dishes and that sort of thing. Like what sorts of dishes are you cooking up, and how did you go about doing the research for all this?
So I grew up in Sri Lanka, so there's definitely some Sri Lankan dishes, and then our concept artist and a writer are from India, so we pull some Indian dishes, and then we have a South African dish because one of the producers is South African. So just kind of just family favorites and things that we haven't seen in other games. That's sort of how we went. And then also like there's a point in the cooking where you present the food, and we wanted that food to be really, really, really interesting visually. So we also kind of based it on some visual variety of dishes, and I think we keep adding dishes. So we'll see how many they are by the time we ship.
Is there going to be like a full encyclopedia where you can like look up like how many dishes you've made out of like however many possible, like that sort of
thing?
So
there's a cookbook you can pick from, but I would like to also do the actual recipes too at some point. I'm also personally been making some of these dishes, so I hope to do that for all of them. It'd be fun to do.
So Thirsty Suitors tells a uniquely cultural story. I imagine one of the goals is to teach players more about Southeast Asian culture and the challenges that come with staying true to that in today's modern world. So having said that, I do want to ask, what are the challenges in putting together a story that presents a sincere vision of that culture, while also injecting the right amount of humor that makes it funny without making it a parody?
Right. Yeah, that's always a white balance. I should clarify, it's South Asian culture, not Southeast Asian culture, because that's another region. So it's close, but it's South Asia, a lot of India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, that part of the world. Yeah, I mean, parody, because we're not trying to really do a parody of anything existing. Everything, all the decisions we make are based on sort of Jala's story and her narrative, and everything ties into that, her sort of redemption tour. So all the elements we bring in, we feel like in games we don't see a lot of tonal shifts. Either something is like really serious or something is really about comedy, and we're exploring sort of more adult themes and relationships, and in real life there's room for times where things can be really funny and goofy, and things can be more dramatic and sad, and tonally we hopefully try to set up each scene and each moment to explore that. So that's how we're approaching it. We're trying to keep it always grounded to the themes and Jala's story, and then also what's visually would be interesting for that sort of need for gameplay as well. So yeah, I mean, that's really it. We just try to kind of reinforce the themes that we started the game with.
So who approached who for this project? Did Annapurna Interactive approach you about publishing Thirsty Suitors, or did you actually reach out to them?
I started pitching this project early 2020, right before everything shut down for pandemic. I was at a place called Dice in February that happens in Vegas, where it's like usually a lot of different publishers and developers. And so one of the things we weren't sure after we did a game called Falcon Age, was our first game, is what we were going to do next. So I had like a couple of pitches, and I started just having conversations with folks. And so I approached them as well as a bunch of other folks to just see. I didn't think anyone would really be interested in Thirsty Suitors as a game, because it's so specific culturally, but it did resonate because it's so specific. It also resonates, I think, universally. And Annapurna really thought it would be a good fit for their portfolio, and I thought it'd be a good fit working with them based on the other games. I really like a lot of the Annapurna games, so it just started that way. So I talked to a bunch of folks, and Annapurna seemed to be a good fit for us. So.
You talk about going to DICE right before everything got locked down for the pandemic. Yeah. How much did the pandemic affect the development of Thirsty Suitors? Were you hoping to have the game out by now, and it just kind of got impacted heavily?
No, because we started the studio fully remote 5 years ago, and the folks we work with are spread across 4 continents, and we doubled the team over the development of it. So we were already used to working remotely, and our hope was that every year we would have everybody come together and at a show or some event so we can be in person, and that certainly makes things harder because we haven't. I mean, half the team I've never met in real life, so. But as far as development, we've kind of been used to this remote development approach.
So last question for me. Explain the specific importance of family in Thirsty Suitors. How important is it to Jala's culture and to Jala herself?
Yeah, it's a huge part of it, especially for folks like myself and Jala who have immigrated to the US. My parents moved us here from Sri Lanka when I was 8. There's a civil war going on, and they were like, we wanted the kids to grow up in a better place and have better opportunities. And our, especially in South Asian culture, family is very close. There's also a lot of guilt that comes from that when your parents like pick up their whole life and move to a different place and they have to start over. And my parents worked all the time so that we can have a better upbringing. And there's also like this sort of guilt growing up. I'm like, well, I don't want to complain too much because they gave up their whole life for us. So there's that sort of dynamic that we want to explore with Jala as well. Like your parents are there and they like do everything for you and change their whole lives for you. And what is that kind of pressure put on a kid, and how does that manifest itself as you get older? So those are some themes that are some heavier themes that we're going to try to explore too.
And that's like an obligation that you feel like even going into adulthood, you still feel the need that your parents sacrificed everything for you, and you feel that there's not enough that you can do to pay them back for everything that they've given you. I understand that coming from a family of immigrants myself. Yeah.
And then you also realize later that they are people, and they make mistakes like the rest of us. And like, I think starting to respect them and also talk to them as people and understand like some expectations that you put on yourself aren't really realistic, and those are things you have to kind of learn to deal with as you get older as an adult. Yeah.
And I take it that we see the development of that relationship between Jala and her mom from the start to the game to the end of the game. I mean, I know we see Jala's mom as a summon during some of those turn-based combat combat instances, but I figure that like that relationship evolves over the course of the story too, right?
Right. And her relationship with her dad and her mom are very different, and we kind of explore that in different ways. In the demo, we see mom as a sort of a summon attack, If you happen to die in the middle or lose your health in the middle of combat, it is a giant version of your dad that lifts you back up. And he says something encouraging and then puts you back into battle and heals you. So there's like this, we're exploring specific personalities from Jala's mom and her relationship with her dad as well. So
that all sounds tremendous. So when can we expect to play Thirsty Suitors, and what platforms can players find it on?
I mean, there is, so right now there's a Tribeca demo that's out, and we've only announced on Steam. As far as release date, I have no idea. We're still working on it. Hopefully we can talk about that at some point soon.
Chandana, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. I love hearing more about Thirsty Suitors. And for everyone watching, stay tuned for more Shacknews E6. We'll have a lot more after this.